Hey, yo, what up, everybody? This is Demo1138. You can call me Demo. And back again to chat with you guys about another topic that's interesting to me. And this one is this is a bunch of my pet peeves when it comes to people talking about classic gaming. And, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. If there's a young 20 something person who's out there getting into classic gaming, they like the gameplay or the aesthetics or just the history. All that stuff is like really cool. I'm here for it. The problem is lots of times like certain claims get made and then repeated, and it's just factually incorrect, and it's just pure speculation that doesn't need to be speculated upon, because with like a little bit of digging around, you can actually kind of zero in on the truth of the matter. Um, and a lot of this to do is to blame on older content creators, because so when content creators that are like more like my age, when they make content, it's a little bit more theatrical. Like Angry Video Game Nerd, for instance, where he's playing a character, he's hamming it up for laughs, but like that's not they're not game reviews. You know what I mean? They're sketches, they're skits. But some of that stuff gets repeated as if though it was like some kind of game review. Um, and then the problem that I have with the younger people doing it is that they have one thought, and that's where it ends. They don't think any deeper about it, and it's frustrating for somebody who was there, and I hear certain things, and yeah, it just drives me fucking crazy. So I have a few general things and a few specific things later on that I'm going to go over. Um, the first thing I want to talk about, though, is like I don't know if this is like really. It is kind of classic game related. It didn't really fit into any of my categories, so I'm just going to get it out of the way now. And that is CRT TV scanline filters. So old school pixel graphics was meant to be seen on a CRT TV. I'm going to get a little bit more into that later. Um, so what a lot of places do, like a lot of old games that are re-released, even like Nintendo Virtual Arcade, they have these scanline filters that you can put on, or even a game like Balatro, a modern, like a contemporary game, will have scanline filters, and all it does is just put these weird lines across the screen. And it drives me fucking crazy, because it's like, bro, have you ever even seen a CRT TV before? Whoever's making these filters, it's like they've never even seen one. Because there's a certain like, I don't even know if they're called pixels on a CRT TV, but I'm gonna call them pixels. But the pixels had a bit more of a glow. There was kind of a bit of a bloom to the whole thing that is never included in a CRT scanline filter for games. So like, I like the idea that people are trying to shoot for this classic CRT aesthetic, but guys, can you do something to get it right? Because what you're doing right now is just not working for me. And it doesn't look like a CRT TV. It's just lines across the screen. Anyway, that that's the first one. We're gonna get into more gaming focused stuff right now. So one thing that gets talked about a lot is classic game difficulty. Um, and there's a whole lot of talk about this that just kind of just really frustrates me. And one thing that's said is that classic games are hard because at the time the prevailing video game paradigm was arcade based, and console games were hard because arcade games were hard. But I couldn't disagree with this anymore, because a console, like, unless the game was a direct arcade port, there's no benefit for making a game arcade hard on a console, right? Because arcades, they want you to continually dump money into their machines, but that's just not the case with the console. They already got your money with the console, right? So forcing you to restart or run out of lives or whatever. That's just not something I'd imagine was ever in their fucking design meetings. You know what I mean? And related, people say classic games were super hard because they wanted to inflate the playtime. And this is also a stupid thing to say too, because at that time there was like no accepted or expected game length. You know what I mean? Like, how long, quote unquote, is a game anyway, right? How long is Joust? How long is DK, right? Um, how do you compare the length of Donkey Kong to the length of, like, I don't know, Mega Man 2? Like, these are just completely different types of games that are, in many cases, as long as they need to be. And in cases where it's like a multiplayer game or something, or like a puzzle game that's just meant to be played over and over and over again, like game length, it doesn't make any sense even by today's standards, right? Because like, how long is Balatro, right? How long is Binding of Isaac? How long is Tears of the Kingdom, right? It's like how much time you got and how willing are you to keep playing it. But the idea that they were trying to extend the length of the game doesn't make any sense, and that they were emulating arcade design. Neither of these make any sense. The fact of the matter is that home console gaming, outside of Atari, like big home console gaming, starting with like the NES and Sega Genesis and stuff, they were still developing standards and norms. You know what I mean? Um, they were just figuring stuff out. And a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever been involved in any game design. I'm not like a game designer, but I've messed around with stuff like Little Big Planet and stuff. And like I'm designing a game that I want to be hard, so like I made the jump, the absolute longest jump you could possibly make, and then people would leave reviews about how my game was literally impossible, even though I knew that was not true. I could do those jumps, but then I'm realizing it's like I'm balancing this game around my experience with my game that I know inside and out, right? So an outsider isn't going to be able to have that level of control over the game. And you have to tone things down from your own viewpoint. But you know what? There wasn't any standards or norms back then. These game developers had to figure this shit out for themselves. So no, games weren't hard because arcade games were hard. Classic console games weren't hard to inflate the playtime. They were hard because that's just what people were doing. And plus, not all console games were fucking hard anyway. Go play Kirby. Go play Mega Man 2. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of a silly thing. Maybe some of these games were hard because they're bad, but maybe some of these games are hard because you're bad. Get good. Um, I did miss a couple of slides here. Of course, Contra. It's a hard game. Then again, up, left, up, down, left, right, BA. You know what I mean? That got you through it. I do want to talk about quote unquote good games versus quote unquote shitty games. This is another thing that's kind of like AVGN's fault, that certain games are just qualified as shitty and certain games are qualified as good or whatever. But man, in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, games were games. You know what I mean? You played the ones that you had, you played the ones that were fun, and what was good games were almost universally agreed upon. Mario 3, A Link to the Past, stuff like that. But what was a shitty game? I think that would depend largely on who was fucking playing it, right? Because like nowadays, Akari Warriors, which is what's on screen, is considered to be a really shitty game. But I'll tell you what, I had a good time playing this game with my neighbor. You know what I mean? I didn't play it a lot, but when I played it, it was fun. So, what is a shitty game? I don't know. A shitty game is one that nobody plays. And I mean, maybe nowadays it's a little bit easier to determine what's shitty. There's a lot of slop out there. But back in the day when there was so little to compare things to, shit, you'd be happy to be playing a game. It doesn't really matter. Um, But yeah, now so another thing that I keep hearing and that really just bothers me is instruction manuals. People's understanding of instruction manuals. The instruction manuals that came with classic games were intended as part of the complete experience, period. I was watching a content creator, he had to be in his 20s, and he outright refused to include anything from the instruction manual in his review of games. And it's like, my brother in Christ, that was like, you can't gauge a classic game story based on what is just told to you in the game. There's no room in that game. That game is the memory size of a fucking JPEG, bro. So all the stories and item descriptions and shit like that, they had to go into the manual. And not only that, like the manual presented these abstracted pixel art. They presented like actual art for these things. So, you know, your imagination knew kind of which direction to take these creatures and enemies and items and set pieces that you're seeing on the screen. So 100% the manual is part of the experience. This particular guy said, oh, well, it's not part of the experience because some people played the game without it. Some people played the games without the manual. You didn't always have the manual. It doesn't matter. You were intended to have the manual. If you went to a fucking Blockbuster and rented a game and it didn't have the manual, that's Blockbuster's bad. You know what I mean? Because they're leaving out a part of the game experience. So instruction manuals, 100% part of the experience. Another thing I've been kind of picking up on, I've never heard anybody come out and say this, but from reading some comments on the internet and watching some videos, people are under the impression that the manuals were some kind of guide to the game. Manuals were not a game guide. Manuals might contain hints, and control information, how to play the game. But there was no manual that was a guide from beginning to end. Some of them might contain, maps, but even in that case, those maps, they were partial maps or incomplete maps, or they were sealed. And even if you had access to that stuff, it's not going to tell you how to fucking finish the game. So yeah, no, game manuals are not game guides, period. And they are absolutely 100% part of the experience. So I recommend if you're going to play a classic game, a lot of these manuals have been scanned through. Look through the manual, man. It ain't going to hurt you. It's only going to help you. It's only going to enrich your experience. In fact, it's going to contain information that is potentially necessary in completing the game that you're playing. Semi-related to game manuals are gaming magazines. Oh boy, there was a lot of these back, and now that I'm thinking about this is possibly a completely different fucking episode because the era of print media is gone, and as somebody who lived through it, when print media left, I didn't shed a fucking tear, but there is something to be said about going to the bookstore or whatever, drugstore or supermarket, whatever, and flipping through some of these magazines. It was a really cool way to learn more about games, learn about what's coming out, find secrets in games that you didn't know existed. So yeah, I think I might have to do maybe something separate on print media, but yeah, I think it might be underestimated how integral in the gaming. How do I want to put this? The gaming environment, the gaming ecosphere, like magazines were pretty important. Um, Now I'm going to get into some more specific things that people say that really irritate me. This guy right here, this Goriah right here, grumble grumble, that's me getting pissed off every time somebody says something stupid about classic games. So Zelda 1, people just repeat the same shit about this game. Oh, it's cryptic. Oh, it doesn't contain any information. You can't figure out what you're doing. You can't. Blah, 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 blah. No. When this game came out, this game was the greatest fucking thing ever because there was like a fucking secret on every screen, right? And you just played it. I was a kid. I was like 6 or 7 when this game came out. And as a 6 or 7 year old, um, I beat this game. Maybe it took me a year or two. Maybe I was 7 or 8. The point still stands. I fucking beat this game. You know what I mean? And uh, I did it mostly through fucking experimentation. I mean, it also helped. I had two brothers, and they're also playing the game. So when they find something, I find something. And another part of gaming that was like really, really important back then was this word of mouth schoolyard talk. You know what I mean? People would say, "Oh, I found XYZ in Zelda. Oh, if you burn this bush or you bomb this wall or whatever." So like you would get information. Um, and then oftentimes like in game, like the information is right there, like this right here, grumble grumble. People are like, "Whoa, what is that supposed to mean? What is that supposed to mean?" I was fucking 6, bro, and I knew this guy was hungry. Seriously, like, just use your fucking brain. Um, and play the game. One thing that I will kind of accept about this is like, oh, where do you know how to bomb walls? Because there was no indicator. And I'm mixed on this because, like, on one hand, you're right. Every wall looks the fucking same. How do you know which ones can be bombed and which ones can't? But on the other hand, look what happened to Zelda games later on, man. Like, there was no puzzle, there was no discovery because this wall has a big fucking crack in it. Obviously, you're bombing it. You know what I mean? Um, and then it went from way too cryptic to way too fucking obvious. And even to this day, I don't think games in general have like kind of found that middle line. Maybe there's one or two shining examples of this, but yeah. Anyway, moving along. Another thing, this is also Zelda related, that fucking pisses me off is why does Link in A Link to the Past have pink hair? And this one's hard to fucking explain because we have to talk about color language, visual language. Um, so nowadays, every display you look at, whether it's a digital display or a printed display, is so highly detailed. They have a near infinite range of colors. They have such a high, such a high pixel count. You see literally everything, right? But this game, to go back to the CRT TVs, this game was meant to be displayed on a CRT TV, right? So each pixel had, you can call it color bleed. There was a little bit of color bleed. Um, there were basically limitations to how things would display on this CRT TV. So when designers back in the day made pixel art, they didn't intend for you to see the raw pixel art like what you're seeing on my screen right now. They intended you to see that pixel art as seen through a CRT TV, right? So you have things like blur and color bleed and things like that that would just happen. And for one, they would round off a lot of the edges. You know, you could still see the individual pixels, but they were a little softer. It wasn't such a hard edge. But also the way the colors would kind of mix together would make things look a bit more natural. And when we were kids and playing this game, never once did anybody ever say, "Hey, why is Link's hair pink?" Right? Because nobody looked at that and thought of it as pink. Because we were just seeing it as the developers intended through the CRT TV. We read that as brown. And you're gonna say, "Oh, how the fuck are you reading pink as brown? Like, how would you do that?" And to kind of give you more examples, I'm going to go outside of games just for a second into the world of comic books in the 90s, right? Venom is black, right? But if you look at almost every appearance he's been in the 90s, he is always colored in blue, right? And you can look in this picture here, there ain't much difference between the blue of Spider-Man and the blue of Venom. And we all know that Spider-Man's meant to be blue and Venom's meant to be black, right? So, like on, visual displays, like screens, just like that in printing, the printing methods weren't as advanced as they are now. So to like have something filled in entirely black, I mean, shit, you'd have like ink bleeding everywhere. It's also expensive to have such a dark pigment over such a large area. so many reasons to not use that much black. So they had to come up with alternatives. And the visual language of the 90s, late 80s and 90s was that this blue is black on Venom. Like you wouldn't even think about it. You wouldn't turn around and ask your buddy, like, oh my God, why is Venom blue in this picture? Right? I mean, I've even seen Venom depicted purple. I couldn't find any pictures of it. But nobody stopped and was like, why is Venom purple? Why is Venom? Just like nobody stopped and said, why is Link's hair pink? Because nobody looked at it that way. It was a completely different visual language that was dictated by the limitations of the processes available at the time. So when you look at these older things, instead of looking at it at face value, you really have to pull yourself back into the time that this stuff was happening, right? Like I said, you can't just have your first thought and go with it. You know what I mean? You have to have a series of thoughts. I know, I'm asking a lot. But you need to have a series of thoughts. And even if that series of thoughts leads you back to your first thought, at least you did the work, right? But just to look at stuff like this and be like, oh my God, what were they thinking when they made Link's hair pink? They're smarter than you. They were thinking the right thing. You're just looking at it wrong. Literally looking at it wrong because you're not viewing it as the developers intended. Yeah. So that's that. One other thing that absolutely fucking pisses me off every time I hear it, and this is getting a lot of pushback nowadays, thank God, is that the reason why Earthbound failed to sell in America was because of this ad campaign that says, this game stinks. So, first off, this has been said before. I've heard people say this, but it needs to be reiterated. In the 90s, gross out humor was the shit. You could sell anything with gross out humor. You could sell food with gross out humor. I can't remember what cereal it was, but it's just like, oh, it turns your milk green like slime or whatever. So, this was not the problem, saying that this game stinks and having the scratch and sniff stickers included with this. That smelled funky. Like, that wasn't the problem. This ad was fine. This ad was perfect. This ad was almost exactly what it needed to be in the 90s for a game like Earthbound. The problem was, and I will tell you for sure, 100% from a person who was there, why this game did not sell is because the only way you could get it was bundled with the strategy guide, which made the game like $30 more expensive than any other game. And you go, oh, $30, that's not a big... It is a big deal when you're a kid and your only way of getting games was when your parents bought them for you, right? And if your parents said, hey, you did good on your credit card, your report card, or whatever the case may be, we'll get you a Vigi game. And you say, oh, cool, I want Earthbound. And they're going to look at the price and be like, oh, this one's $120 and this one's $80. Or, you know what I mean? Or $100 and $60 or whatever. Like, why don't you pick a game that's $60, right? So not only was the game expensive, but also the people that would be buying it weren't in control of the money, right? It was their parents buying it. So, like, legit, anytime anybody brings up this ad and cites it as a reason why the game didn't sell well in America, just tell them to shut up. The people that would have bought it were not in control of the money, and the game, it was just too expensive. If they had sold this game without the strategy guide, I guarantee you, it probably wouldn't have broken records. Probably wouldn't have hit, like, Final Fantasy VI levels of fame, but it definitely would have sold well enough, for sure. So, yeah. And then just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit about 80s nostalgia. I probably should have gotten a couple of pictures for this, but I get really... I grew up... I was a child in the 80s, and I, became an adult in the 90s. So did I grow up in the 80s? Did I grow up in the 90s? I think I technically grew up in the 90s, but I lived through the entirety of the 80s. I was alive, right? And I'll tell you, man, every time I see 80s shit on TV, I roll my eyes. I want to barf. It's just like they took a handful of the most ostentatious shit they could find about the 80s and they threw it all in one salad bowl and says, hey, look, it's the 80s. And honestly, that's not how that shit was at all. Like, most of the 80s looked more like what you think the 70s looked like, right? Like the 80s is almost not even its own distinct like decade, right? The way I look at it is the 80s was like tape that was used to connect the 70s with the 90s, right? Because a lot of stuff that you see as 80s kind of like throwback nostalgia bait, a lot of that stuff is actually from the 90s. Like a lot of anything that's like really, really fluorescent colors or neon colors, like sure, a lot of that stuff came out in the late 80s, but it was really popularized in the 90s. Um, but if you're looking at like the early and mid 80s, man, you're seeing a lot more wood grain, like not just on cars, but you're seeing wood grain on all of your electronics and everything. Um, a lot of like what we would kind of call retrofuturism in the actual devices. Um, yeah, man, like shit just in the 80s just does not, it did not look like the way it does on TV. And I don't know why they do this. Um, maybe it's nostalgia bait for people my age, but they're also trying to get younger people. So like maybe they're trying to create false nostalgia in the minds of people who weren't even alive at the time. I don't know what the point of it is, but it does bother me. So yeah, fuck nostalgia bait. I have a whole video on nostalgia that I'm planning, so we'll get into that more later. But yeah, I think that's it for today. These are just some things that just really irritate me as somebody who lived through classic gaming. Um, I hear this kind of stuff all the time, and every time it makes me cringe. And I just wanted to go out and kind of give you guys a first-hand perspective of how things kind of used to be. But yeah, anyway, if you enjoyed the video, do all that fun YouTube shit. Fucking like, comment, subscribe, fucking hype, whatever. It's too much. But if all that stuff is great. But if you do want to support the channel and help me improve my videos and stuff like that, please consider checking out my Patreon. It's kind of nearly impossible for somebody my size to get to be monetized now. They just literally made it twice as hard to reach that goal. YouTube has just made some policies. I'm sure you know all about it if you're on YouTube as much as I am. So yeah, it's going to be really tough for me to cross that threshold. So in the meantime, if you guys want to support me on Patreon, I would fucking love that. I have multiple tiers. They're all kind of the same right now. But as I get some patrons, I'll discuss with them, what kind of rewards would be good, from the different tiers. And also, um, you know, uh, anything made from the Patreon, it's just going to help me get better equipment and stuff so I can make better quality videos. But yeah, that's enough about that. In either case, go back and check out some of my older videos if you haven't watched them yet. And if you have watched them yet, just sit tight. I'm going to be coming up with as much stuff as quickly as I can. So, yeah, in the meantime, peace out.